This album just has like it definitely is going to require a little more listens because again, each listen was getting me more with it, more interested in it. Uh, I found a lot of different things that I liked where I felt like the splintering self part in the pop song, the opener, had a strong, almost like butthole surfers kind of feel to it. I don't know if I lost.
Yeah, I kind of bit about the splintering man, and I'm like, yeah, I love that bit.
Hello, and welcome to my first podcast show. I am here to basically have a new show where I'm talking about kind of getting enthusiastic about music, just in general. I like if you want to find someone who's going to be talking about like all the famous artists, all the famous bands like the Beatles and the Pink Floyds and all of them, I love them, but I can tell you that there's like 70 other people who can explain it much better than I can and can run laps around me. So like my thing is I like getting into albums that just mean a lot to us personally and sharing that enthusiasm with other people and getting excited about it. So my idea is to bring an album here, have someone come on. My guest today is Mr. Chris. How are we doing today?
Hello, yes, Grant, thanks for having me. It's Friday right now, so Friday afternoon, feeling good. Thanks for having me on as a first guest. Wow, what an honor. Um,
Absolutely.
no, I'm doing well, and I'm always down to talk about music, discover new music, rationalize why I listen to music, you know,
Right.
all of
That's
that
one of the
stuff.
crazy things. Actually, I almost want to go back. There was a book one time that was it was I saw it like a Barnes and Noble, but it was talking about why we like the music that we like, how we like our backgrounds, how like where we grew up, how our people around us were, and how that shapes our influences through our music. I need to go back and find that book. I wish I knew what that was because that's
It
such
is
an
interesting.
interesting thing
Yeah.
of just how everyone's music taste is just so eclectic and so different. It's like snowflakes. They're not two are the same.
Yeah, it is different. It's really interesting to me, when I just think about that, how very different some of the influences that have brought me to, you know, uh, deep dives or phases of my music discovery career. uh, from video games like Grand Theft Auto is a great example. I discovered a lot of music through Vice City and San Andreas, just to the stuff my parents were listening to, or a lone suggestion from a single friend that turned me on to a band, which I then discovered all of the similar artists, and the different like causes for rabbit holes are, uh, that's an interesting, that's an interesting topic for sure.
It's definitely like one of the best things about music is when you do find that rabbit hole and you go down and you just find something you're just like, oh, this is going to be on repeat until I hate it.
It's great. It's a great feeling to discover something new, and in the age of having immediate access to every record ever recorded, almost, I mean, more or less, it's kind of overwhelming. And so I feel like, you know I don't know if it's my age or the combination of that with the streaming age, but um I feel like I have less of those aha moments than I probably used to. I've also listened to more music. I'm kind of aware of different genres that maybe I wasn't in, when I first started getting into music, but um, I still get them once in a while, and it just feels so good. Like, and then you see an artist that you like a couple songs, and they have 10 albums, and you're like, let's go, I can't
Right.
wait.
Oh, man. Yeah. I love that about music. It's just the coolest fucking thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're going to start off with I have a little playlisted segment where I'd like to go over and have a theme essentially for a different way, like just, different topic to have pick a song for and come up with something for. And in honor of course, first podcast, I asked Mr. Chris if you had a podcast on whatever topic you wished and you could get the
Yeah.
rights to any track for an intro song with no questions
Yeah.
asked, what song would you choose?
Yeah. So I thought about this, and you know, the song I picked very well might exist as an intro to like an NPR thing. It kind of has that vibe to me, but I would go with Pink Bullets by the Shins, off their 2003 record Shoots Too Narrow. It has this really great kind of soothing guitar riff, and just on an acoustic with these nice slides, and it would just lend itself really well into like a soft voice, just kind of welcoming you to a podcast. And yeah, I wouldn't really need James Mercer's vocals so much. Like that part doesn't matter. It's actually great in the song. It's a great song. It's a great record. But forget all that. I just want the acoustic slide bits of Pink Bullets. And I just think that would be my pick if I wouldn't get sued by Mr. Mercer and the Shins, as it were.
I feel that. That's actually, I like that choice right there. Because definitely you kind of want to have that nice, calm, soothing little tone going into just whatever you're talking about, kind of have that nice, easygoing feel to it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it kind of lends itself to, grabbing a cup of coffee in the late morning. That's the kind of vibe that's the kind of time I typically like to listen to things. If I'm able to, if I don't have an immediate work meeting or something, it's like a nice way to kind of not start your day, but kind of ease into your day. And I think that kind of, for me, I associate kind of listening to podcasts, especially with kind of like a morning commute when I used to drive to work and not have the ability to listen to streaming. And I'd like to listen to what they were. Sometimes I would listen to talk radio, not necessarily just the same top 40 hits over and over that the corporate radio stations like to spam. So something about that I associate with the morning and waking up to a nice voice talking about whatever they're talking about.
Right? Yeah. So especially if you can get like someone that has just one of those like rich voices that lends itself to something just like a soothing talk show, kind of like that.
That's right.
You definitely have one of those voices.
I don't think so.
100%. 100%. I'd hire you.
No, I owe it to the microphone, man.
Hey, the microphone does work magic.
Yeah.
It can work its magic, but
That's
there's
right.
got to be a good voice behind it in the first place. So it doesn't make a bad voice good. It makes good voices better.
It just enhances what's already there. Yeah, I see.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The one I'd always had in mind was there's I'm pretty sure you're familiar with They Might Be Giants.
Of course.
They have a song. I gotta find out what record it's on if I'm at this point.
The only record I'm really familiar with by them is Flood. So if it's on a different record, I might know it.
Yeah, it is on a different one actually. It's so it's actually funny. The song of the name of the song is "Put Your Hands on the Computer."
Okay.
And legitimately, there's a let's see. Cast Your Pod to the Wind off their 2007 album.
Okay.
It's their lead song, but literally there's a part where it just goes like, "This is the podcast you're listening to. This is the one you chose." And then it rises up into like almost a little sax solo. And I was like, that's like, you come in with that and you're like, "Hey, good morning and welcome to, KJR X90 radio station. Hey, it's Clearwater in the morning." I was just
that's
like,
perfect.
Absolutely. I was like, that's the one. If I always wanted that one to be there, but yeah, if I could get anything with no strings attached to just get that as an intro song, it has to be though. Someone else has got to have chosen that.
Someone's done it for sure, but who knows how far their reach is or if anyone would notice. So
absolutely, mine's definitely going to be farther. So that's what we need to worry about. Did you have any other ones that you had like close?
That one really came to me as kind of the main one. Know if I had any others really on the back burner, but Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of is about that the the lead in, you know. Uh I feel like you could kind of go a bombastic route as well, just to hype people up.
Mhm.
But then I'm afraid your energy has to match that and like keep it rolling. And so I feel like the calm kind of like let in is a, you know, I don't know,
It
is a
seems
little
more up the
harder to
alley of
say.
the podcast you would be listening to or be on. Because I mean,
Yeah.
there's a Pat McAfee show, and
Mhm.
he for the longest time had like almost an EDM little rise up and oh, boom, and then he would like start the show there, but he
Yeah.
always had like a it's Saturday and boom, all right, and we're talking
Drop it.
Sunday, so he always had like that sports, infectious energy coming off of
Yeah.
it, and also just that kind of just comes with being an athlete. You got to be you get, and those, especially those high situations, you're getting yourself keyed up, ready to go.
You
He's
gotta
just
be
already
happy.
used to that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I feel like if you lend yourself to that kind of content and you can keep that level of energy, then more power
Oh,
to you. I feel like for me and most of the stuff that I would listen to that's, maybe less energy
right?
overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Pink Bullets was it would fit the bill for me. There's probably other Shin songs as well that I would probably take because I think they all kind of have that vibe that kind of leads in what future generations will, maybe label as elevator music or something. I don't know. I don't know if I don't think they're elevator music, but they have that calming vibe that I could see someone, saying that about them in the future when they're not so culturally relevant. Are they culturally relevant? I don't know. They are to me, but
I don't know. Do they ever have like a number one or anything?
oh
The
no, nothing like
Shins?
that.
I don't
But
think so. Yeah.
I don't know. What's the song off Oh Inverted World? You know the one. I can't remember the name.
I
The
believe.
hit.
Yeah.
It was in Garden State, and then it became like a big indie thing, and uh, whatever. It doesn't matter. New Slang. That's what it's called. That's the name of the song.
Okay.
That was kind of everywhere for a few years, I think. Um, and they had a couple of other hits on like alternative radio, but I'm not sure they were ever. Uh, it's hard for acts like that to really push to the top, especially after the 2000s.
Yeah. I do feel that. Uh, moving on to my next part, which will be the musical hot topic, which is just kind of looking at some kind of interesting musical, you know, concept, ideas, something that's maybe going on recently or whatever. This was just kind of a fun one. I don't know. I was reading something on the Motley Crue breakup where essentially they had one of the members like they've had like almost a couple of the members have to leave and stuff. Uh, but like eventually if they kept going on and didn't have any of those founding members left, it almost kind of brings up like one of those like the musical ship of Theseus, where it's if like all the members are gone from the band, if all the founding members are gone from the band, is the band still really the original group? Is it, or is it, should it become something new? I mean, you've had artists that have obviously, seen that and they changed it, or even with just like an iconic member. Obviously, Joy
Mhm.
Division is one that comes to mind where their lead singer passes away, and the first thing they changed up their style. They kept the band basically together, got a new singer, but just ended up changing the name to New Order and completely changed it on there, which I
Yeah.
thought was kind of cool. Is you kind of keep the sanctity of Joy Division as its one act and as that guy's thing, and then you have your own. But I can also see wanting, if you're like a band, wanting to use that name to continue marketing with it. Unfortunately,
Yeah. Yeah, that's tough because at some point it feels like you're the band in name only at some point. If if all of it, especially if it's all new members, I would probably claim that, you're really just that band in name and nothing else. But I guess if you get the rights, you have the kind of legal right to do that. I think from maybe morality or uh, it feels a little, I don't know if tacky is the word, but it does feel a little like deceitful to insist that you're the same band, if none of you are the same. If the lead singer or someone key to the group um, leaves or passes away, or some other reason, and it's like a majority of the people, then um, you know, I think what New Order did was probably the right thing, and given their sound was different, they went for a different sound style than Joy Division proper, and I think it made sense to kind of rebrand entirely. But as you said, they could have just as well continued with the name, changed the music substantially, and just used that momentum that Joy Division had to keep it up. Obviously, they grew their own fan base regardless, but you know, I think there's a case that could be a little shisty to like keep it going if eh, yeah, especially if you consider there's no original members left, which I think there are bands like that in existence now that are touring, and it's like nobody of the original is left, or it's like the bassist and nobody else. No offense to bassists, like they're important, but if they're not
I
the
can't
singer,
be.
if they're not the front man, they're yeah. I mean, I would say the same about a drummer, right? It's like if all you have is your Jimmy Chamberlain or something, are you still the Smashing Pumpkins? I don't know. It's
There's
hard. It's
certain
hard.
bands you could probably say, like if you take away Les Claypool, Primus,
Yeah,
you've probably got that whole entire band right there.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a far and few case between there. Moving on to the next little segment I had a little planned here was a little what have you been listening to? Kind of different things like just
Oh.
obviously we're in our little Discord, so we have all the different deep dives, different things we're doing, or different video ideas we're doing with different people. So what have you been listening to over these past couple of weeks?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of concurrent projects. I've kind of fallen off the new music wagon, especially the past couple months. I had a good I had good intentions to try to stay on top of some releases, and I finally got around to listen to Scaring the Hose, because I heard so many good things about that. So I finally got around to that. I'm doing this album of the year series, and we're now in 1972. So I've been kind of binging that year as much as I can. So a lot of great records came out in 1972. That,
Uh,
yeah, year doesn't really need any introduction, but kind of catching myself up on that, and also kind of just discovered the band Sparks. So I'm that was kind of an aha moment for me. And so
what
I've
album
kind of
from
been
Sparks?
diving into their stuff. Yes, so it started with their debut. What they were known as Half Nelson then, and their album was also called Half Nelson, but then it kind of got rebranded into Sparks and Sparks. So you'll find it kind of referenced as both. So that kind of kicked it off because I just thought their sound was so unique. And then their most acclaimed album is Kimono My House, which came out a little later. I don't know what year. I'm sorry if Nick is listening, he knows. But that one is just really great. And it's kind of funny because the other day I had the radio on when I'm just too lazy to plug my phone into my car, and I heard their song "This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us." It came on the radio. I thought it was playing from my phone because I've been listening to that. And then like right after I played a T-Rex song from the Slider, which I really love. It was like they were just having like a glam metal moment, or not glam metal, glam rock moment on this radio station it's like one of those HD stations, so there's not a bunch of commercials. It's mostly just music. And it's actually great. And I like a lot of the tunes they play. So it's kind of like this serendipitous thing where the Slider came out in 1972, so I've kind of been listening to that. And then Sparks is another band I've kind of been getting into. And anyway, that was a fun little like moment of life, catching up to what I don't know, to my reality. And I don't know. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately. Yeah, like I said, a lot of focus on 1972. We're also working on 2003 and celebration of the 20th year anniversary. So Shout out to my 2003 records. There's some good ones out there.
100%.
But
So yeah, what's
yeah,
your top
yeah.
three for
And
'03 right now?
my top three for '03. Let's see. I know at the top it's definitely Quebec by Ween. I'm a big Ween fan.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that's definitely my number one. I think my two and three, it's probably gonna be the My Morning Jacket record. I think that's called It Still Moves. And then funny you should mention Opeth. I really love Damnation. So those are probably my top three. We'll find out in another like couple months and see what's still at the top. But yeah, those are really great. And then I guess the last thing I'm listening to, I have we have two concerts booked this summer. Um, so we're seeing Built to Spill with Japanese Breakfast. Should be a lot of fun. And yeah, I think Alex from the Discord will be at that one in Portland. So we'll make sure to get a TLM family photo there. And the other one is Modest Mouse with Pixies. I think that's like a double header deal. I've seen both of them before, and they both do great shows. I'm very excited to see Pixies in a bigger kind of venue. It's not that big, but it's like an amphitheater outside summer night. Should be awesome. Uh, the Modest Mouse drummer passed away recently, and I don't really know who's replacing him or what that's like. Obviously, Modest Mouse, the drum parts aren't incredibly difficult, but it's got to be a little weird. He was one of the founding members with Isaac Brock, so they go way back, and the band must be a little bit different without without him playing. So anyway, hopefully they're getting along okay, and I hope it'll be a good show. He's kind of notorious for getting drunk at concerts, so we'll see how it
just a little
goes.
bit, just a little bit.
Yeah,
Gosh, man,
yeah,
I had a big Modest Mouse phase back in the day too. Quick little
yeah,
rapid
yeah.
fire. Which was your favorite? Were you a Moon and Antarctica person, or were you a Lonesome Crowded West?
Yeah, I think I'm forever Moon in Antarctica. I gained a lot of respect for the Lonesome Crowd West during the deep dive of '97, but Moon in Antarctica is just it's really great. And I live in Portland obviously, so it's usually it's more likely to be rainy than sunny here, I think, statistically, definitely colloquially. So that album just really fits that mood of kind of this, gloomy Pacific Northwest vibe. Great for a drive to the coast. The coast here is often gloomy and gray and rainy. That's part of its charm. So, yeah, I think it fits that vibe just really great. And it was really important to kind of my discovery of music. It was not the first record I heard by them, but it's always been my favorite, and yeah, probably will be.
I love that.
Yeah.
Ah, man, and just like that, like kind of that middle segment, right, where it's going around, Lone Down There, and it goes into like Stars or Projectors. Stars or Projectors is just one of those tracks that I just get lost in that track. Once that little violin part's coming in,
Yeah.
oh, that little descending pattern, it just every time I hear it, I just get lost in that track. I remember driving to that and
Yeah.
just driving around my area, like around my around my city at night, and just listening to that, and just oh, just those feelings will always kind of be ingrained in my head from just listening to that and really vibing with that album.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do think it's a great driving record, as you mentioned, and I think that it'll always be that for me. I remember getting into them, I think, in high school, and the hits were mostly off of I don't know, the other one, the other record. I didn't come prepared to talk about Modest Mouse that much, but
You're good.
the one with Float On and Ocean Breeze Salty and
Good news for
Good
people who love
News.
bad news.
Good News, yeah.
Love it.
So all of those hits were like kind of everywhere, and it felt like that was kind of the driving force of what the band meant to a lot of people around me. But one of my buddies had Third Planet as his MySpace song. If you remember MySpace song.
Love it.
To me, he had Third Planet and that that guitar intro, that very infectious immediately, and it made me want to check out the rest of the record because I had not heard it for sure. And just yeah, I don't know if it like changed my life, but yeah, that record is a 5. I listen to it frequently, and I'll love it forever. So
I love it.
yeah.
And to move on to our last topic, Mr. Chris, I told you to pick an album to bring to the table this week. I kind of didn't say that it was like something that was, something you were super passionate about. I just kind of asked you to bring an album to the table. So, and then I kind of changed that up as we started the podcast and was like, yeah, we're going to do something about it super passionate about. But you gave me this one because you know that my taste is definitely all over the place. And it is much needed for an artist like this. We had cLOUDDEAD's 10, which was released in March 9th of 2004. Where were you in 2004?
That sounds right. Well, I was not listening to this in 2004, that's for sure.
Okay.
In 2004, let's see, I probably was not yet in high school. So, yeah, I was probably wrapping up my tenure at middle school. Some of the worst days of my life, but easier to not remember that so much.
Yeah, right. I totally understand that. So many different things you're trying to change.
I was a child. I was in very little control of what I was doing back then. But yeah, this came to me late in high school, I think, or maybe just as I was leaving high school. Some of my friends with discerning and influential music tastes, showed me, I think they showed me Dead Dogs 2 in order to catch my eye. And then I just thought I'd listen to the whole record. And it's always been this, like, this is not a 5 or anything for me. And it's very bizarre. And I kind of love that about it. This album actually led me to discover one of the artists on here goes by Y, all caps, YHY, WHY question mark. And Y has a few records, most notably Elephant Eyelash, and my favorite is Alopecia. Alopecia from 2008. That is a 5 to me. It's a little more cohesive than this record. It still goes a little experimental at times, but has a lot of this kind of mix between psychedelic kind of pop music and this weird pseudo hip hop stuff. So anyway, I highly recommend that if you listen to this and even some parts capture you. I think what he went on to do was a great direction for this kind of music. But the reason I didn't pick that one is because it's very special to me, and there was a chance you would not like it. And no.
I totally understand that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would recommend checking that out sometime. But this record in particular was kind of the first exposure I had to this group of guys. This they go by Anticon. I think that might be like the record label that they kind of release under. And it's these group of guys. It's Y, it's Odd Nostum, and Dose One. Dose One has the really nasally voice. Y is the other voice, and Odd Nostum does most of the mixing and stuff for them. So there's some other people on the credits, but it's really those 3 that make up the core of the band. And yeah, a lot of people maybe prefer their self-titled record, but this is the one that I kind of started with this group of odd fellows, and and I've kind of followed them a little bit since. Dose One did this project with with Mike Patton and the guy from TV on the Radio. Like the three of them released a record. The record is not that good, but it has a couple notable songs. They're all pretty eccentric fellows. So I kind of like that when, artists create this kind of like non-super group super group. Like they're all a bunch
Absolutely,
of like,
100%.
kind of medium success. I mean, Mike Patton probably the most successful of the lot, but getting together kind of a strange motley crew of artists who are into, making, obviously just doing it for fun. They knew they were not going to get any critical acclaim or anything. So
Mhm.
I respect the artistry, and that's a lot of the fun here for me. This music it's weird. I re-listened to it. I suggested this to you to listen to without having heard it in maybe a couple of years.
Mhm.
But I've probably listened to it. I own the CD somewhere, so it was in my car for a long time, and I would spin it frequently. And yeah, I something about it just captures me. There's a lot of these weird kind of recorded moments throughout that they incorporate, sometimes more effectively than others. I think some of the songs don't really necessarily work very well, but for some reason that's part of the charm of the record for me. I don't know how to describe that other than I don't think it's perfect. I think it's flawed, but I kind of like the flaws. But I think the songs that do work are just they're so their own brand that I don't know who else was really making this kind of style of experimental, like, I guess it's hip hop. There's a lot of hip hop influences. There's some psychedelic influences. There's some indie rock influences, I suppose. But um, I love the lyricism. There's a lot of weird topics they cover, and sometimes morbid, sometimes like oddly biographical. Not biographical, biological.
Mhm.
They talk a lot about like ants and minnows and stuff like that, and I don't know, just some weird stuff. And I have so much fun with it. I can't explain why, but I thought when I think of you and your tastes, and I respect a lot the birth of the music that you are, that you talk about and that you're into. And I thought, I needed kind of an oddball one for you. I couldn't give you something standard that maybe, I knew about that you had to listen to. I thought I would go there, and I hope this one took you there. I hope it took you somewhere at least.
It definitely took me some places. It's it's very interesting. I had a couple of different like feelings that kind of came up like listening to it. I kind of one of the things you were pointing to where this came out what 2004. I can't
Yeah.
think of a lot of I don't know. I don't know all the history of hip hop and music. I know a decent amount, but I don't know everything. But I can't think
Sure.
of many things that were getting this experimental in like 2004 and kind of bringing together these kind of almost chop samples. This sounds like if you had told me that this was released in 2020, I'd have probably been like, oh shit, like, it's probably a big JPEG Mafia fan, kind of has that very same where it's very janky. There's a lot of different samples, not as much distortion and like kind of that absurd and craziness
Yeah.
that, sometimes JPEG would go to, but definitely still like eccentric in its own way. Uh yeah,
Yeah,
super cool.
that time. Yeah, definitely that time was definitely not 2004 was
This
kind of
ringtone rap, it was starting to take
was it the
off.
crunk era? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
we're
was
getting in
it
there.
was
We're
the
getting
Yin Yang
quick.
Twins, and I guess it was maybe Kanye was about to drop maybe he just did the college dropout, but
He was
regardless,
producing
this
for
this
like Common by then. I think 2003
yeah,
had a B,
yeah,
so I think he was on there. So he was at least doing production and having
he
kind of
was
those different
around,
samples, but not
but
this
not quite.
experimental. And not only that,
Yeah,
this is their
this
second
yeah.
album because 2001 I think was when their first one came out, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. But
yeah,
like
and
I haven't heard it, but I imagine it's got to have about the same experimental flavor to it. that this one
Yeah,
did.
and they, there were pioneers before certainly, and they weren't the best to do this type of experimental hip hop. But I think that it's a it's a very particular kind of brand, and I think what does it for me is kind of their, like, I went back to their lyricism. It's surreal, it's odd. The topics that kind of flow in and out are just bizarre, and I'm I'm now kind of at peace with Dose One. He was never my favorite. The nasally vocals were never quite my favorite, but I've kind of like come to terms with that. But whenever Y is kind of on the track, I really like his kind of delivery, and that really, if you listen to like a Y record, you get a lot of what's on here, but maybe a little more focus and a little kind of less of the um full-on experimental sounds, and the recorded samples and stuff like that. But again, this is kind of where this one trajectory of music kind of went for me. And I was always kind of enamored by it. It's weird, it's a little depressing, but I still have fun listening to it. So
Were you into hip hop around this time?
um let's see, this would have been, yeah, at the end of high school. That's kind of really when my musical tastes were starting to explode. And I was discovering especially a lot of, like, I guess 90s music more in depth than the hits that I was growing up with, and that included hip hop. So I was fairly aware, but it would still kind of take me a couple years to really kind of enter the world of hip hop and become more aware of the bigger players, the the Nas
Mhm.
and the whoever else I was listening to back then. I can't remember, but
Yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, it's kind of one of those albums where like I could see getting someone into hip hop in a sense where it's like almost kind of the bridge from moving something into, like, if you were like into rock or if you were into kind of that like eccentric music and kind of getting into a hip hop flavor with it.
Yeah.
Um, oh, I forgot I was going with that. um, but yeah, like the one thing I was trying to compare, I know that the album's going to be a grower because I know with each listen, I was getting more out of it. So there's so much more to like kind of, take from it, which
Mm,
is one thing I do love because most of the time I listen to an album, it's always going to go up on the second listen because I'm starting to get familiar with things. I'm starting to get, closer to it. It's kind of the point, like when's the listen where the subsequent listen is like, oh, I didn't really enjoy it as much, or oh, I want to skip that one track or something. That splintering man part definitely had a lot of like the splintering self and the hollowing out. I was it sounded so Butthole Surfers like almost immediately, and I was just like, oh
yeah,
yeah, okay, we're in for this kind of journey. And then the best
yeah.
sample on the whole record was the Kisses for the Lasses. Love
Oh yeah,
that.
love
Oh,
that.
dude, I want that a
And
sound bite.
kisses what on asses. Yeah.
I was dying every time I heard that. It was just so good. And another thing
Yeah.
too was where I don't know if you listen to Blue and Exile's album, Miles Davis, I think from like
Oh,
2019, 2020.
yeah,
But
yeah.
one of the songs that I think was that the Keen Teen Slip was the one where it sounded like in the middle, it sounded so close to something I would have heard off of like that album. And I was
Okay.
like, I would kind of
I'm
wonder if
pretty
anyone's been
sure.
influenced by this, by like, I would love to listen to like JPEG or see if anyone would like talk about who these guys were. I'd like to see who heard these guys and was influenced by them.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how wide this stuff is known. It feels kind of, it does feel kind of internet core to me.
Hmm.
I on Rate Your Music, this album does have 2,400 ratings, so it's not nothing. But it's also not like, big time hip hop, like, obviously a lot of the artists who we would mention would be. But still, I think that you know, yeah, it's hard to say how far their influence reached for me. I think there's always kind of this, you know, concept of experimentation in hip hop that, you know, I would probably argue a lot of it kind of sourced with the DJ Shadow and, you know, that kind of stuff. What he was doing in the 90s really carried on, and I think that influenced a lot of people for years to come. Um, but I do think their use of sampling here is really interesting, and obviously other artists would want to do similar things with just bizarre clips, you know. And I think JPEG Mafia is a great kind of you know, parallel to this, and I would argue that JPEG Mafia has largely been more effective as an artist than this stuff.
Mhm.
But I think this stands alone as a pretty interesting project. And as I mentioned, I think the solo stuff was fun for me to kind of go check out after this, especially why, because he's probably my favorite of the three guys. So
Yeah, I'm definitely
yeah,
gonna have to check out that alopecia record. I want to see. I want to see what he sounds like by himself. I actually kind of liked the
yeah,
nasally voiced one. I mean,
yeah,
it grew on
and
me
that's
very quickly. I love very eccentric voices too. So I love voices
yeah.
that just sound weird or interesting. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Like,
You're
okay,
cool.
we're in
You're
for it.
cool.
Yeah, yeah,
I love this. So what rating do you
yeah.
have for that record?
For this record, I have it at 4 stars. Um, you know, yeah, it's and that might be maybe high for some people, but I think on Radio Music it has close to a 3.5 overall. So it's, you know, for those people who have heard it, I think there's a, you know, I think most people can understand where they were going, and maybe can appreciate at least some of the tracks. Um, but what I was going to mention is that the song Dead Dogs 2, if you look up cLOUDDEAD um, on like Spotify, you'll notice that Dead Dogs 2, there's a remix by
Boards of
um,
Canada.
Boards of Canada. Yes. And that was actually my first exposure to Boards of Canada, was because that was always like a top searched thing for Dead Dogs 2, which is probably my favorite song on this record.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, about them seeing dogs that they think were dead, but they rise up and they're security dogs for people trying to sneak into a game at an Oakland stadium, and just kind of describing the scene, how it takes your breath away. And the way they just describe all of that is really interesting to me. And I think the beat is really cool. But the Boards of Canada remix is very cool also. So I highly recommend you check that out, because I think it's like their top played song, and of course it's a remix by Boards of Canada. But um, you know, Boards of Canada got some respect from me for pulling something out of this record that, you know, I don't know, other than a couple of my weird music friends in high school and I've never heard anyone talk about. So
Mm.
yeah, it's a cool, that was a cool thing, and they turned it into, you know, something kind of different. But obviously, you know, I respect the source material a lot, so I was bound to like what they did with it.
Yeah, it's funny too because I had kind of written down the tracks, but I had the screen was cut, and so
Yeah,
I got the Dead Dogs 2, and I saw Boards of, but I didn't see the ending of it. And then like halfway through the record, I was like, man, this a lot of these like small sample things have a strong like Boards of Canada feel to them, especially like some of like the like almost like those children vocal snippets that'll sometimes
yeah,
get kind of
yeah,
interspersed throughout there. Sounds like very
yeah,
much like music is a right to children. And
yeah.
it was like, as soon as I got that and I like opened it up and I saw the thing, I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense that they would have a Boards of Canada remix on here too. I was like, that's awesome. That's super
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. So that's a little bit of like cred to them. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like this record is, you know, it's part of a time of, you know, kind of this underground experimental hip hop stuff. And they're not the hardest rappers. They're talking about some weird stuff. They're not really, you know, pretending to be what they're not, I think.
Mhm.
And I kind of respect that. The lyrical content is just kind of bizarre, and the song structures are odd. But yeah, overall, I think the songs really work for me. And like I said, even the ones that don't really work for me, I think add to the overall kind of charm or uh, sadness of this record.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely is another one where it's like it's not like dealing with any kind of bravado or anything. It's very surrealistic, as you said. It's very, I mean, it's talking about like sort of like I think a song basically about gun control, as you were saying that the Dead Dog song. A lot of like I like stuff like that though. Change it up. You can't
Yeah,
always chocolate's really good, but you can't have chocolate all the time. Sometimes you gotta have something. You gotta have a little flavor, a little
that's right.
complexity to it.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I would never really claim they're like lyrical geniuses or anything, but
Mhm.
I think their vocal play is at least a lot of fun. And yeah, it tickles something for me that that I really appreciate. So um yeah, that's Clouded.
Yeah.
Check them out if any of that sounded interesting to you. I maybe start with Dead Dogs 2 before you jump right into the record. Although I think Pop Song and Teen King Skip are a pretty good representation of the rest of the record as well. But if nothing else, I think Dead Dogs 2 is a great song, and uh it's just a couple minutes long. So if that is a turn off to you, then you don't have to commit to the whole record.
Right. So I mean, I felt like the first four songs were actually about right up my alley. Also, I thought it was interesting how it had a lot of like the lyrical structures felt very I don't know how to describe it other than like very nursery rhyme,
Yeah.
almost kind of structure and flow to it, which I again kind of added to like that surrealism, especially talking about because most of the time when they're doing that, they're talking about animals. And they kind of had that little like weird surrealism. The minnows have teeth in their throats, I think was one thing they repeated over and over again, which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
that's a line. Yeah.
yeah, that got me. I was like fucking scared of minnows all of a sudden. I didn't really think too much about them until first time I heard this album. But yeah, dude, I appreciate the recommendation. This was a fun trip to go through. It was super interesting to have for a first album for
Yeah.
the podcast. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to have given you a weird one. I knew I had to dig a little deep, and I've been, this album, although it's been a while since I've listened to it in full, I do pick out some tracks, and they come on once in a while on, Spotify shuffles or whatever. And something about it just spoke to me. And um yeah, like I said, I knew I had to dig a little deep. So maybe it's not as deep as I thought, because it has more ratings on Rate Your Music than I ever thought it
It's
would. And people
pretty deep.
have
It's
talked about it, but
I don't
it's
think this
still
is
like,
anywhere near surface level kind of stuff. This is
yeah,
underground as it
yeah, that's
gets.
fair.
2004.
It's yeah,
I love it.
it's never gonna be top of the pops or anything, but
All right. Well, again,
oh
dude,
man.
thank you, Chris, so much for coming in and spending a little time with me and talking some music. I super appreciate it. Anyone who is watching, I appreciate you sticking around for the video. Uh, it's going to be an interesting one. I'm sure you've already seen by now. It's going to be pretty spliced. It's going to a couple of internet connection problems, but
That is
hopefully,
okay.
yeah, we'll be able to piece together hopefully a full episode. I'm going to try and
Oh
figure
yeah.
out some ways to get this internet fixed or at least more stable for a connection for videos, but we'll see. But
Yeah,
thank you
man.
again so much, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, absolutely. Good luck with this podcast, and good luck with the splicing. Definitely looking forward to hearing all the episodes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much and have a great day.